Alrighty. So hello everybody. I know it's been a while since the last time I recorded a video and put it up on this YouTube channel. Um, I was under the weather, so I wasn't really recording or editing any content. I do have content that has already been recorded and is ready um, for you all to um, enjoy. Um, Another discussion, but before we start that discussion, which will be on the topic of forgiveness, I wanted to give some of my reflections on the ageism discussion that we had with my friends Joshua Crawford, Joshua Suh, and Justin Crawford. Justin does have a brother named Josh, so I I can easily get confused. But yes, so one of the first things that I want to say, I have some notes here that I'll be reading from. Um, is that in doing these videos, I want to reiterate every single time the point is never to bash our places of worship. The point is never to put people on blast, um, but it is to talk about these topics that are very much needed conversations to get us thinking. It's not to tell anybody's pastor you're doing this wrong. You need to fix what you're doing. Um, it's to just get us to think and do what we need to be doing. So, and it includes me. I am not encouraging people to be overly sensitive and get in their feelings every time something happens. So, we do have to have somewhat of a thick skin when we're dealing with people, whether it's in the church or we work customer service at our job or, whatever. We can't be crying about, every single thing that happens every time, but there are things that we can talk about and we can think more about the things that we're doing so that everyone in our church feels more included. We are pushing for biblical inclusion of all ages by having this discussion. And you miss out when your church is only led by one age group or only has a congregation that is predominantly one age group. You really miss out. A healthy church has mixture. Um, Church culture helps to keep that mixture alive. A healthy church is ideally one that has multiple age groups. Um, I don't think it's necessarily wrong for a church to be predominantly, whatever, like race or whatever, but um, we shouldn't be like forcing it to be that way. What we should be forcing is for people of all nations, all languages, all cultures to want to come and give their lives to Christ and to worship together with us. So that naturally is going to give us churches with different cultures, different languages, and all types of things like that. So I do want to point back to a conversation that I had one time with one of my personal friends, where they were telling me about their church and how they really felt that their church was unhealthy. This was a conversation I had like several years back. Like, they don't even, they're not there, but they felt like their church was so unhealthy because nobody was in, a relationship or courting anyone. Nobody was getting engaged or married. Nobody was having babies, and at least it wasn't people who were staying in church and walking the walk of faith and salvation and things like that. So um, again, I don't know who's watching, but feel free to add comments and I can respond to you. But if you do have something to bring up or a question or whatever. Um, yes, so these are just some things like she just really felt like her church was just so unhealthy. Um, and I think to a point there's substance to that because in a healthy church, we should be encouraging people to find a spouse, to have children. It's part of our biblical mandate to be fruitful and to multiply and to raise up children for the glory of God. And because if a church is doing that, you're naturally, like I said, you're going to have toddlers, children, teenagers, young adults. seasoned adults, elderly. Like, you're going to have people from different generations who can all pour into one another. Biblically, we're supposed to have older women teaching younger women, older men teaching younger men. And we can't do that if our church is only comprised of, teenagers, or only comprised of people over the age of 55, 60. And we should always be trying to bring people in. We should always try to like have that. No, we gotta have that salt, like that. Mm, that I want to bring people here, and that people want to come here because they see the way I'm walking and they see the way that I'm living. Um, so, if you've watched the other three videos, I tried to cut the discussion down so it wasn't like a long, like 2 hour video, but it was three, like 40-ish minute videos. And if you want, you can go back and listen to those before you listen to this, or you can listen to this now and then go back. But one of the issues that we talked about was when people think that correction only goes one way. Um, when like a young person is given a responsibility, and an older person will like hover over everything the younger person does, or talk over them when they've been given a responsibility, kind of like steamrolling, and not letting them make mistakes, and assuming that they have bad intentions when they're doing something. um, I've seen that to a point. um, I know there was a situation where a young person was given a responsibility by her local church, and then within the larger network of churches, there was someone who had more experience but didn't allow the young person to, didn't allow them to function in their capacity, didn't allow them to make whatever mistakes, and felt like it was appropriate to correct them in front of the group they were leading. And that's never okay, because even going the other way around, like, they would be so embarrassed. And I think we have to be cognizant of the things that we're doing. If we're bold enough to correct somebody in front of a group that they're leading, and to have an attitude, and to point out everything they're doing wrong in front of other people, we should be open to the same thing coming back to us. And if we're going to get upset and tout around about our title and our position and how long we've been saved, like, that's already like Jesus had to, when the disciples were fighting about who was going to be greater, like, and their mama had to come to Jesus to ask them, who was going to be able to sit here. Jesus cut that off. So that's not a biblical behavior to talk about your title, or to talk about how long you've been saved, or anything like that. Like, it's just not biblical at all. Um, so, like we did in the last video, I talked about this church that asked their older generation to not come to church because they felt like, um, oh, they felt like the old people, to use that term, like, I hate saying that because that could be offensive to people, but um, the older saints who were in their church, they felt like if these people are here, excuse me, young people are not going to want to be here. Um, and that's like erroneous thinking. It's like that just doesn't work. It's like, in a place of work, if you have older employees, that's not going to make young people not want to be there. Like, are you paying well? Do you treat your employees right? Do they like each other? Do they get along? Like, what perks are there to being here? So if we want people to be in our churches, um, we need to be preaching the gospel. We need to be treating people right. We need to not be burning out people. It's not about, there's this older population here, so let's get rid of them. And I think that young people, sometimes they just don't want to hear testimonies from the mothers and the deacons. Like, we need to hear that. We need to hear their testimonies. We need to hear their stories, because they were saved from something too. At one point, they didn't know Jesus, and they didn't know how to walk with him and follow him. And they needed somebody older to walk with them and talk with them and mentor them and correct them, and to correct them in love. And that's the same thing we need today. That's never going to go out of style. That's a biblical thing to practice, is to go to an older person. The gospel is to be preached by word of testimony. And if we're not sharing our testimony, we're not doing our full job in preaching the gospel. And churches shouldn't, you know, I, I don't know. I just kind of feel like we need to be using people. We need to be using them their whole life so that it's not just, you know, you're spending all of these years being dormant, and then all of a sudden when you're like 40, 50, 60, then you have a position. You should be already used to being involved and already used to um, giving of yourself and sharing your testimony, even when you're a teenager, even when you're a young adult, even when you're, you know, a more seasoned adult and you have a, you know, house and kids and family and job. We should be in the habit of sharing of ourselves with the church that we claim we love. So if we're waiting until people are 40, 50, 60 to be doing everything, and then they no longer have the same energy that they had when they were younger, that's telling us that the people who are young now need to be used. They need to be using their energy for the church and for the sake of the gospel. The disciples were not old men. They were probably like teenagers or young adults. Like Jesus was 30 years old when he started his ministry. And it's like, you know, I think Justin had said before, like he wasn't going to pick people older than him to follow him. They were going to be younger than him. So, you know, Jesus was not, you know, using like an age threshold to qualify people. So that wasn't a thing. Um, Young people today have so much more access to biblical training. This is coming from, I was speaking to one of my mentors about what he felt about this topic. Young people today have more access to biblical training, commentary, and other types of biblical materials, study materials, evangelism tools than they used to. Okay, everything back then used to be person to person. You had to, you know, I don't know about you all, but when I was growing up, um it wasn't just the like Jehovah's Witnesses that were going door to door. There were like people who went to like Christian, Bible believing, Holy Ghost filled churches who were going door to door also and sharing the gospel with people. And you know, things used to be very like person to person. There was no YouTube back then. There was no everybody being on the internet back then. Um, so this all like all this media that we have where we can post a YouTube video, we can do a Facebook Live, we can do a Twitch, we can do Snapchat, we can be on Instagram, we can do all of this is so new, but God has given us so many different tools to reach the nations. Like we don't even have to, I mean, we still should, but like, you know, we can still reach people in Africa without being in Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like we can reach people in Asia without being in Asia. We can reach people in Europe without being in Europe. We can reach people in Mexico, South America, Canada without having to be there. And that's a blessing. So we have access to all of this. And you know, sometimes people lose their patience with older individuals who need help to learn how to use these tools, but they have access to it too. And we're the key to showing them how to do it and facilitating the gospel being spread, not just being irritated because oh this oh, they don't know how to use this. We should teach them. We have all the resources to be able to teach somebody how to use something and how to get, if we're really gospel concerned, if we're really gospel centered in our thinking, it should be no problem for us to help somebody else to you know, to reach the gospel. We still need a pastor. We still need to, you know, submit ourselves to leadership and be under some type of teaching and an umbrella of leadership. We still need that. It doesn't mean, you know, I'm gonna wake up one day, I'm an unbeliever, and then one day I wake up and I read my Bible and get saved. The next day I wake up and I decide not to go to church, and but I'm gonna study the Bible online, and I'm gonna go and you know, do a Bible study and start my own church. Like that's not what I'm saying at all. Okay, just in case, because people do think like this. Um, but we do have access to these tools. So where I was saying earlier, there are churches where It's predominantly one age group. And one of the reasons why that's unhealthy is because if something happens that affects just like that age group, you lose your church. So um, if I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good example, but like let's say right now with like COVID COVID-19 or babies that are getting like RSV or whatever, if your whole church, I know it's kind of impossible, follow me a little bit with the theoreticals here, but if your whole church is just like the baby group and something like RSV is coming in and it's attacking them and they're getting sick and they're getting hand, foot, mouth or whatever else, they're not, they're going to be getting sick. They're not going to be there. They're going to get, like um, teenagers have, whatever other commitments. Let's say, they get involved in sports. A lot of sports take place on Sunday. They're not going to be there on Sunday to fill up your church pews. I mean, they should be, but, like some people don't bring their kids on Sunday if they're playing sports because that's just the schedule, but they should be teaching them at home still. Um, but I guess the best example I can think of is churches where it's just older folks and um, they're losing membership because a lot of their members are dying off. And I think at some point it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to um, do new things and find your young people. Where are these people's children and grandchildren? Why aren't they coming to church? Let's start having those conversations about why people stopped coming to church and why our churches are dying off, because I think that mistreatment and a lot of other, bad habits are what make people not come back. And if we sit down and be humble enough to have those conversations and show people that we do love them with the love of the Lord, I think people would come back. But when we're stuck to only having one age group, I know my other examples were like really, really horrible, but people are dying off and their churches are closing. Like I can name at least two churches within 5 minutes of my house where it's predominantly older people and their churches are dying off. And they get their steady, tithes and offerings because the older people are set financially, but once they're gone, they're gone. Like there's nothing after them, and there's no like I don't think that, I don't have children right now, but I don't think I would have peace in my heart coming to church and my children don't come to church and my children don't live for the Lord and I'm not doing anything to evangelize them. I'm not having conversations with them to figure out what is it that you need. And if it's the entire church whose children don't come to church, whose grandchildren don't come to church, then something's wrong. And I know we're on the topic of ageism and I'm veering just a little bit, but it does have to do with it because then you're not having enough representation of all ages in your church. Um, so, with the situation earlier that I was describing, the young person that was given a responsibility and the other person was kind of like steamrolling over them, um, comes another conversation where um, this does happen, and I know it doesn't happen everywhere, but when like I'm 32 years old. My husband is 26. Okay, we're grown. We work or go to school. We pay our own bills. One day the Lord's going to allow us to have children or whatever. We have our own transportation. We don't ask people for money, willy-nilly. We don't come to church and be asking people for money, or whatever. Like we're grown. Okay, so just a qualifier. But I just it's like we want to still be treated like we're grown. And I think it's like just kind of funny when I get like stared at, like, and it's not really everybody, but I just think it's like funny when I get like when people think that like staring at me is gonna like intimidate me or wear me down or get me to do something they want me to do. And this is like really like if you're an older person and that's what you're doing, like I can't. Qualifier for this is that most saved people who go to church are not going to try to do that to you. But there are people who still have bad habits and, will try to do things like that. But staring is not a threat to young adults. And it only matters if there's a living history behind it. And what I mean by that is when you have people who have relationships, healthy relationships in the church, and you have the older people and the younger people learning and pouring into one another and developing their relationship in that way, and like it's like a circular thing, right? When you have that, and it's been over a span of years, you can always look back and say, well, you know what, if mother such and such or sister such and such is staring at me right now, I know it's out of love, and I know that she knows that I know better, and she's trying to tell me something, and I already know, and I have that relationship to lovingly take that from her, as we have an inside, that's an inside communication. um like if I'm acting crazy one day and somebody's looking at me like this and just staring at me, I look at her and I'll say, okay, I need to fix what I'm doing right now, or I need to stop, and but like someone you don't have a relationship with, because there should be a relationship, that's the key. Someone you don't have a relationship with is trying to, that's out of order. You have no relationship. There needs to be a relationship. um Not respecting a young person's position only because they are younger than you is ungodly behavior. Um, and I think something that we talked about in the previous video was you don't have to sound old. And we use Jacqueline Carr as an example, where just the way she says things, the way she does things, she sounds like a very adult person. I mean, now she's like a young adult, but when she first started, when she was like 12, 13, 14, she was sounding like a 60-year-old woman, the way she was speaking. And it's not like a normal conversation pattern for someone that age. So, what we were saying is you don't have to sound old to qualify yourself or to make yourself valid and to count. There's nothing wrong with emulating a person that you respect, if that's what it is. Sometimes if someone you admire speaks a certain way, um, that's good and fine, but don't allow yourself to feel like you're not saved or that your words don't count because you don't sound a certain way. God made us all different. And I know I don't talk like everybody at my church. I don't even talk like everybody in my own family because I'm my own person, because God made me an individual person. He didn't make me and a super gloomy to anybody else so that I could act like them. Um, the most that's going to happen is I'm going to pick up habits from my husband and he's going to pick up habits from me. But at the end of the day, we're still our own people. I'm going to pick up habits from my family and from his family and from my church and my friends. But at the end of the day, we're our own people. God is creative enough to make billions of different people, and we don't have to act like each other. Um, so, you know, we want to make sure that we're respecting each other's individuality at the same time. We don't have to act like, you know, um, mother such and such or bishop such and such, or talk like them, or pronounce words like them to make ourselves sound like we're saved. You sound like you're saved if you're actually saved, and then words come out of your mouth. Like that's what being saved sounds like. You just have to actually be saved. So, nobody, including me, would ever want to bring their kids to a church where people are nasty towards children. Um, we want them to have a relationship with God. We want children, like sometimes young people like to invite their friends over to church, and then sometimes they come back and sometimes they don't want to. But we want to be open, and we want to be sweet towards people that come, especially visitors. But we have to be sweet towards each other anyway. But we want people to come back. We want people to feel the love of God. We want people to, the Bible says to suffer the little children to come to Him. um, he wants children to be saved. He wants children to have a relationship with Him. He wants children to know about Him. And if we're being mean to children that walk in the door, if we're we every young person that walks in, we're gonna eat without knowing them, require them to do this list of tasks just because they're a young person. That's backwards. There's no relationship there. So we need to love our children and young people that are coming in, because they are at a volatile age. They are at an impressionable age where um, they won't remember they may not remember what you said to them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And we don't want them to feel like I went to church and somebody was just nasty towards me, and I feel like that's ungodly. And if that's what God's like, I don't want to go back. We don't want people to feel like that. Um, so what's wrong with being kind towards people? What is wrong with being kind towards people, even when they're unkind? You know, people should be kind to us, but the qualifier is not that they need to be kind to us first. There's nothing wrong with being kind to people. There's nothing wrong with having healthy relationships. And I think that's what this is all about for me. I want us to think of solutions. How do we bring young people? And that's one of the things that I already kind of mentioned, is that we should be talking to our young people and figuring out why they don't want to come to church anymore. What behaviors are pushing them away? Are the behaviors normal, and maybe, they're just kind of taking it the wrong way because they don't have a relationship with God, or what is it? So, if we're doing anything to cause that unhealthy relationship, then that's something we need to fix in ourselves. And being 45 years old in the Lord is not uh, an excuse for us not to reflect on ourselves and change things about ourselves. We can change things about ourselves up until the day we die. And all it takes is us asking the Holy Ghost to help us actually take the steps to do it, and then take the steps. Nobody has posted any questions, but um, I will continue to look at some of these questions. I did learn that I believe YouTube removed the messaging center that used to be part of YouTube, where people could inbox somebody if they really didn't take it away and I'm just not finding it. Feel free to let me know. But for now, you can reach me at christianmatitv@gmail.com. I will put that in the description. Um, but yes, these are my reflections on ageism. Let's be kinder to one another. Let's see value in one another. Young people have the energy to reach people for the Lord, to do things, even physically to do things. They have the means, they have the access to the right tools. They have that malleability to learn and to be taught. Um, and older people have wisdom, they have experience. I mean, let's hope, let, age doesn't bring wisdom, but they have, hopefully, wisdom. They have experience. They have years of memories and ideas and things that they've seen, and just, I think there's value. They have a testimony, um, And young people have a testimony too, believe it or not. You can be living in a Christian household your whole life, and then you get saved. You officially decide to get saved at 25, 30 years old, and you think you don't have a testimony because you didn't go out and do drugs. Your testimony is that the Lord kept you from going out and doing drugs. Your testimony is that the Lord kept you from going out and having premarital sex. Your testimony is that the Lord kept you from going out and getting drunk and going out and smoking weed and going out and doing all kinds of things. Your testimony is whatever the Lord has kept you from. And sometimes the enemy will try to make you feel like you were sheltered, so you don't have a testimony, or you were this, so you don't have a testimony. Your testimony is whatever the Lord has kept you from. Your testimony is that you're alive today. Your testimony is that God is still keeping you right now. So that is more than enough to praise God about. That is more than enough to share with somebody else. And if for whatever reason you still got the enemy trying to tell you your testimony doesn't count, go talk to an older person, learn from their life, ask them about their story, and praise God for their story, because this is how we grow in the gospel. So, with that being said, I'm not going to pull this out any longer. It's just like a little 30, 32-minute video. So, these were my reflections. Just be on the lookout for new content coming up. And I think I mentioned before, I'm going to be releasing some new content on my other channel, which is Christian Madi TV. And yeah, just some music and stuff. But I haven't really done much of that lately. So I really do want to do it. And be on the lookout. My husband launched CredoLoud Productions. Look for that channel. CredoLoud is one word. Productions is another word. Credo, CredoLoud Productions. But yes, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care. God bless. Oh, also like, share, subscribe, comment, and like the Facebook page. Don't want to forget to say that, but yes, please do it.